Hello.
Hi, Sarah.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll start in just a few minutes.
Cool.
All right. Hello again to everyone. Welcome to Cairn, Marking the Trace, a reading of poems and passages by Cameron Miller. My name is Sarah, and I'm happy to be Zoom host this evening. But before I introduce Cameron and tonight's reading, I'm going to go over a few technological housekeeping items. First, feel free to be on or off camera. That's completely up to your preference. We do, however, ask that everyone stay muted for the time being. To engage with us throughout the evening, we invite you to use the public chat. We'll hold a question and answer session towards the end of the reading. So to that end, please submit your questions in the chat whenever you're moved to do so. I'll be monitoring the questions throughout the reading and sharing them out during the Q&A. Just for your expectation setting, our full evening together will last around 40 minutes. Next, for those less familiar with Zoom, know that you can change your screen's view by clicking the icon in the top right corner of your Zoom window. You'll see options that guide you to either the gallery view, where you'll see everyone who's on camera tonight, or the active speaker view, where you will only see the person actually talking. And finally, we are grateful to the good folks at Unsolicited Press and SMOL Fair, a small press book fair, who have made tonight's reading possible. Cameron would also like to share that tonight's reading is dedicated to the memory of Frank Richardson and Gay Hadley, two wonderful poets and lovely friends. Now, I'm honored to introduce a fantastic writer who also happens to be my dad, Cameron Miller. Cameron left full-time parish ministry in 2013 to nurture a broader spectrum of writing. Since then, he has had 2 novels published, along with Karen, a collection of poems and essays, and the source of tonight's readings. Karen was published in 2020 by Unsolicited Press and nominated for a Pushcart Prize. You can find Karen at Barnes & Noble's, Amazon, or preferably your favorite independent bookstore. On top of his published novels and poetry, Cameron offers a weekly column in the Finger Lakes Times and maintains an active website, subversivepreacher.com. Across all his writing, Cameron unabashedly weaves together metaphors that ground us in the emotions and experiences that we may otherwise be tempted to pass by. So tonight, I invite you all to identify what those emotions and experience might be in your life right now. And with that, I will turn it over to Cameron to begin our reading.
Wow, thank you, Sarah. Good evening. I begin with the unseen visible, seen by the invisible unseen. You see me, seeds of Sion sprout between your toes, matriarchs and patriarchs, Abraham's, Isaac's, and Jacob's, the mitochondrial Eve, but still you see me. Me, a mite, mere fleck of stardust, invisible, infinitesimal, soft matter, grain of sand, smidgen, dab, crumb, alloyed speck of mush. You see me. Me, nearly nothing. You, utterly everything. You see me, hear my whine, know my voice. Faint heartbeat buried in my ribs whispers to you, and you hear it among the waves lapping the sands of the cosmos. So It's a little weird to see you all and not just jump into a grand conversation. Some of us are strangers here this evening, and a couple of you I haven't seen in 40 years. So to all of you, thank you very much for being here. I am deeply grateful, and I know that some of you will be joining a little late and some will be leaving a little early, and that's the benefit of Zoom and being able to do that these days. So I just want to offer a word about Karen as a collection. As with all my writing and preaching, for that matter, I'm interested in pointing to the sacred that is hiding in plain sight, meaning, of course, that all life is sacred if we have the senses to behold it. So this collection is divided into three categories: nature, human nature, and the sacred. But in fact, the first two categories also live in the fold of the sacred, so it's all a bit artificial. And then just to say that that many of you know, after a quarter century of living inside cities, we moved to Vermont to kickstart a writing career late in life. We lived up on the border with Quebec in what's called the Northeast Kingdom, which is incredibly beautiful and with a very thin veil between the human community and its wildness, which is a perfect place to begin listening again. And in listening, I learned to write poems, something I'd been unsuccessfully trying to do since the 1980s. So while in Vermont, writing fiction and relaunching my website, something shifted inside, and these and other poems came to life. So I want to begin by reading a few poems from each segment, beginning, of course, with nature. This is entitled 11 Below in Vermont. Onyx dome over pastures of snow, trees cast shadows by starlight. Nothing moves, no flashlight, everything we need to see seen. We stop, dog and me, mesmerized by Milky Way brushed thin on arc of pale glitter from horizon to horizon. Even dog stares into illuminated stillness. Seven sisters over Jupiter tip Little Dipper upside down, spilling light into our darkness. And then we hear it, cold, calling us from all four corners. Half creaks, muted pops from inside trees. Frozen moisture trapped inside wood pushes outward, stretching rigid life, demanding it change, expand. Dog's ears perk, head tilts, first left, then right, then up, then down. Moments unroll, sounds, dog, me, all one with snow, stippled light, piercing cold, stillness. The voice of winter's night lingers. And this next poem I wrote fresh from holding my grandson for the first time. It's entitled Chromosome Reach. In low buttery light, a 4-day-old sleeps nestled on the soft pillow of my thorax. His perfectly smooth head radiates warmth. Against intention, my fingers, nearly as long as his legs, wander back again and again to stroke that exquisite softness. The knuckled front of my wrinkled mandibles scarcely brush the side of his head, curling down behind meticulously curved ears. His face, artfully sculpted to be his and his alone. Bulbous eyelids seamlessly rolling into a tiny nose, skin curling with soft lines into lips, and that funny heel of red chin with weight of fleshy cheeks puckering around it. I want to close my eyes too, but they refuse to eclipse the little man baking warm strength of life into me. Only days from 65, with the years and miles aching in my joints, the limit of years pressing upon my mind. This sleeping infant heals me. By osmosis, The stem cells of new life seep through the moment to renew my heart, my brain, my bones. Is it my chromosomes, the genes of my father and mother echoing, whispering through flesh and running through my veins? Or simply life itself, unrolled and animated with what we cannot name or measure? And then back to Vermont now, or anywhere that has autumn and winter seasons. This is entitled Stick Season. The city of trees surrounding my house is a ghost town now, clawing naked limbs, save the oak, whose amber leaves curl and shimmy, clenched ferociously and shaking against Arctic blasts thundering off the lake, rattling the house. Those crisp brown fists quiver in the passing harpoons of air, yet even the adolescent twigs springing from her core hold steady, sturdy, indifferent to wind chill, ice, or ricocheting squirrels. Bushy evergreen escorts on three of her sides, the oak stands sentry, pencil straight, with gnarled feet buried beneath a lumpy carpet of snow. It's not for me to know when her leaves will drop, or why pine needles hold bristle to brush, or if anything dies or lives. So there's a little taste of nature. I want to move then into human nature. I learned from preaching to many of you that credibility and accessibility in a sermon hangs on the preacher's willingness to be vulnerable and to share our own experiences. So while not everybody has suffered a serious depression or recovery from addiction, for example, my sense is that there are elements of any human experience that, if named out loud and given a kind of fortunate rendering of words, will be an echo to nearly anyone or everyone. So that's my effort in these poems, particularly about human nature. And this first one is entitled Washington Street Cemetery. Little bone white tablets lean backward, silent to the wind, unresponsive to creaking ancient trees, flat-faced indifference to memory-driven squirrels, now clawing, manic for brunch held within crusty snow. Some headstones look smooth, alabaster polished by more than a century of snow, rain, wind, dogs, none of it an indignity to the dead. The words etched into one are Latin, a college professor of Latin. Was he insistent all generations going forward know who and what he was, or was it his children? The smaller ones cry out, half eaten by earth heaving upward or drowning in layers of humus. They cover babies, the young not deserving a full-size stone in a world in which even the dead are sorted by class. Mr. So-and-so and his wife, without a name, get an erect obelisk, shadowing the lesser stones below, a gnomon silently imposing sociological order among the graves. The dead do not care about size or place or honor any more than a sycamore cares about the height of a spruce or the girth of an oak. The cemetery whispers relentless neurotic fixations from those yet to die. This is Trinity Place in Geneva, New York, my church home. And we have a gallery going at the moment of photography paired with poems. I sent Tracy Genovese, the photographer, my poems, and she selected photos of those poems that those poems evoked for her. This next poem is depicted in this photo, The Fork in the Road. Where or why she took it, I'm not sure. This poem is entitled Ore. It's the goddamn fork in the road. the cleft between left or right, gain or loss, yes or no. In it is the moment you choose to get pushed to the side or wander indifferently or shoot free throws to decide. Your decision, reaped from missing information, is a crapshoot. Vermin on the yellow line, bug juice on the windshield, collateral damage in body bags, victims all of fatal picks. Dither as you will, sooner or later, you walk forward or backward, east or west, up or down. The hammer of fate falls immediately when you decide. The nauseating thud you won't hear or know until least expected or desired most. And finally, before we enter the sacred, I wrote this poem one winter next to our gas fireplace on our Washington Street home in Geneva before we moved. It's entitled Existential Truth. Blue-streaked tongues of yellow flame, fed by invisible gas, infiltrates real-looking wood, made of non-consumable synthetic something. The proximity of fire fills my head more than warms my body. A blonde Labrador mixed with golden retriever, a faux breed of canine yet real and shedding presence, sleeps curled in front of the real but fake fire. This world is difficult to discern. The brilliant morning sun reaches through dirty glass, warming my face from billions of miles away. The fire, 2 feet to my left, is a distant breath of warmth to my barren ankles. Reality television emanates from the White House as real bodies die around the actual world for fake causes at the command of an unreal president lambasting fake news. It is a real fire fueled by genuine gas, whooshing through a manufactured straw of steel, sucking across hundreds of miles only to lick these imagined imitation logs, producing real warmth that does not truly heat much of anything. Meanwhile, existential truth, real meaning, if ever there was such a thing, seems hard to find. I studied truth many years ago and found it among the gathered leaves of books. It escaped and remains elusive on the other side of the veil where I live with real imitations and authentic trickery and manufactured reality. The sacred doesn't look or sound or feel much different than what we would call ordinary life. So whether it's nature or human nature, the sacred is kind of like, where's Waldo, and waiting to be encountered. So it's particularly difficult to tease out as a separate category. But Cairn are little piles of stones that somehow have become very popular lately. And it's kind of a double metaphor for the sacred that we stumble upon, as well as those people, places, and things that point us toward the sacred. So I want to begin with the title poem, Cairn. I smile at small piles of stone, horn-shaped tower of homely flat rounded rocks, stacked leaning, straight or curling, variegated, not bright, from sandy to dark gray to black streaked with white and sparkle infused garnet. Ungainly yet friendly, no comeliness unless you were anxious and in search of one. Awkward, silent fairies is how I think of them. Stone whispers of kindness left to echo in the ear of anyone who comes along. Cairn offer assurance about the path you are on, your trace still aligned. They smile and say, cross here in safety when water parts the land. Eloquent even on barren rock or desert sand, empty of anything else, so to speak, or poking through the hushed silence of snow. Connotation or denotation, they point the way And who doesn't need that from time to time? Hope you're still with me. So we're getting close to the end here. So I would like to just say a word about pairing poems with essays, which is not something that's done a lot. The essays echo the content of the poems, and I've paired them because not everybody likes poetry or finds poetry accessible. I wanted to create a bridge between the two hemispheres of the brain, so to speak. So what I want to do now is to read a poem that's then followed by a brief essay that echoes the poem, or they echo each other. The poem is called Listening to Dark Angels. And if you don't have any dark angels, you probably won't understand this. Dark angels, eels in dank corners, on thrones of wrong, haunting wakefulness, hibernating the in-between. I unlock the door. I'm listening. We might have been best of friends on another day, different night, if not for scuffling over this same body, fighting for the driver's seat. I'm listening. Brighter angels let me down, preening in the spotlight, oogling in the mirror. I listen to them. They still have an ear, but now I will listen to you. I'm listening. This inscape of ours shifted, land shear and rock slides, collapsed boundaries, converged continents. We can't keep marking the same corners as our own. I'm letting you out. If you start swinging your weight, pushing the weak, tricking the stupid, baiting the earnest, I'll slam you back down, then put you back faster than a snake bite. For now, I'm listening. And this is a little 500-word essay entitled Loud Angels, Geneva, New York. It's early morning dark. A star or two smiles through the light pollution of white street lamps, the domed blaze of home security floods, and even the lunar sliver of light curled further above. Dog and I crunch brown, red, and yellow leaves, some the size of a catcher's mitt, in the historic cemetery where no one has been buried for 100 years. Old, pale gravestones the color of the moon, our tongues rising up from the lumpy ground that wag left and right, forward and backward, and talk in whispers. Even this early, there is enough noise to wake the dead. A garbage truck grinds its gears from 1 to 3. A school bus lets loose the yellow blimp's distinctive flatulence. The car with the bad muffler that heads to work the same time each day. And that dog with an emphysema bark that yaps at us from the other side of the street. But we disappear into the cemetery and pull an invisible curtain of quiet behind us. I wish people could visit one another's thoughts. Just fly in for a small look, then zoom out again. If only we could do it, leave no footprint or debris behind, but peek in on a few special people to determine whether or not we're crazy. I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel the need for verification. It's the angels that raise this question. In those angels, if it is those angels of my better nature as much, if not more, than the darker ones that concern me. They whisper loudly in the echo chamber and lithely dance the tango on the tiniest of nerves. Most of the time, I do not know which to believe, or even if any of them are trustworthy. I know for a fact that memories have been switched before, changed to conceal the guilty and sometimes indict the innocent. They also lay blame traps for other people to step in and hold elections about things for which they don't even have a vote. That rowdy crowd of voices would just as soon be in charge instead of me. And doggone if I don't always know which of us is in charge. But the cemetery is quiet, only the ghosts of other people and long ago ones at that. Dog wants to get off leash and run crazy eights or chase the posse of bold squirrels that sashay around the cemetery, make a noise in the leaves, knowing she could never catch them. Her unadulterated joy of smelling everything sweet or nasty and sheer delight in whatever moment she is in causes me to suspect there are no angels lurking in her mind, just whatever is there within the reach of her senses. And that appears to be enough for happiness. Oh, to be a dog some days, with a nose that works and soft floppy ears that hear everything, and yet instinctively know what to pay attention to and what to ignore.
All right. So I think we will pause and do a few questions if folks have them. And I do have one from the chat to start with. So can you start by describing your concept of dark angels and maybe talk about the inverse of that too?
Well, sure. I mean, I don't mean angels literally, although I know that some people do. I mean voices in our heads and our dreams and our thoughts that invite us or urge us or chastise us to do one thing or another. And dark angels, I think part of what I'm talking about is that it's not always easy to discern the difference between who's a dark angel and who's an angel of better nature or not. So it's really, I really mean it as a metaphor for that sort of inner work that we always have to do. And that if we, Jungian psychology, has the whole notion of the shadow. And if you don't know what's in your shadow, it's going to be more powerful than if you, work on understanding what's in it. I did Jungian therapy for 5 years. And so that whole notion of shadow is a kind of a powerful thing for me. I don't know if it answers the question.
I think that comes through in a lot of your poetry and your other writing too, of exploring what's in your shadow and in different ways. And you confront that pretty directly. I think bringing the reader along with you in a lot of ways. So encouraging folks to submit questions via the chat if you have them. Otherwise, you'll be stuck with me rambling on asking my dad questions. So feel free to submit. While we're waiting for folks to ask questions, can you talk a little bit about how or why Rabia, your dog, appears so much in your writing?
The blessed Rabia. Our dog of many years that Sarah remembers died our last year in Buffalo, one of our last years in Buffalo. And so when we moved to Vermont, we didn't have a dog. And I'm quite extroverted, and Katie, my wife, is quite introverted. And she would come home from work at the end of the, and also in that experience, I went from being from a job that was very extroverted with, seeing just lots of people all the time, to being a writer and seeing nobody very often. And so one day Katie came home and said, "You need a dog." Because mostly I think she got tired of me talking to her about stuff that was like rambling on. So we found Rabia. I don't know why she's in there. I guess I discovered through my newspaper column here in Geneva and in the Finger Lakes that people really like it when I write about her. And so it's encouraged me to do it. But also it's in writing a poem or a story. It's sort of another set of eyes to watch, to have the experience through, to write the experience through, to wonder about what's in her mind or how she experiences that. I guess it's a compelling kind of thing. But she is a fairly constant companion of mine. So those of you who have dogs or cats probably have the same experience.
She's a great companion too. Okay, so a few questions have come in. The partnering of themes in both essay and poem is rich. Which comes first from your idea, poem or essay? And does one genre help you edit the other?
Oh, I don't know. Mostly I think the poems come first. And the essays, I have this weekly newspaper column, and like Loud Angels appeared in the newspaper. It's a kind of weird column. And it also gets published on my website, but it's, I have to deliver 500 words once a week, and it's a great exercise. And I'm often saying to myself and to Rabia, what the hell are we going to write about this week? And so sometimes I will consult poems that are half written or in the poetry stall, so to speak. And so sometimes that works. Some of the essays are actual sermons that have been distilled down to 500 words and put in secular language. I find that a lot of fun to do, and hope that it makes accessible some of this weird stuff to people that might not otherwise read it. And the poems too, for that matter.
That's got to be some intense editing process to distill a whole sermon to 500 words.
Normally when I realize that I can.
Some good self-reflection going on, I'm sure. All right. Another question for you. Of the three subtopics of the sacred, nature, human nature, and divine, which do you enjoy writing about the most and why?
I like writing about nature. It was interesting that that Amazon listed this as a nature collection, nature essays, I think. I can't remember, but I think what Vermont taught me to do was to really look again and hear again. I have a poem that I wrote up there called Chickadee, and I wrote it because I discovered that chickadees' winter song is different than their summer song, and that just blew my mind. And I mean, and it was only in listening and hearing it and saying, "Huh, that's not the same as it was last summer," or hearing the sound of ice or of cold in trees, just listening so much more carefully. So I think that the nature poems are the ones I like to write the best. But then there are those light and dark angels that also, trying to delve into what all of us deal with on some level, and being able to talk about it and name it in a way that may be less scary than some of us feel it sometimes. I don't know. The sacred is just hard to write about. I want to end with a poem from the sacred tonight, but it's, that's a tough one. So that's my job, but that's a hard one.
Related to the sacred, Sheila noticed that the chromosome reach is in the nature section, while Declan's birth is in the sacred section. And I don't know if you noticed, but Declan did appear during the reading of the chromosome reach. So do you have any comment about that, since they are both about your grandchild's birth?
Yeah, I don't know if I did a very good job of categorizing these poems, but there's a clear difference for me. So chromosome reach is about the whole nature and just the natural, when if you haven't had a baby and you have a baby, you're all of a sudden in love with this thing that you didn't know 30 seconds before. And if you're a grandparent and all of a sudden you have a grandchild, you're just totally full of love for this thing that, just appeared in your life. And how does that happen? So that's kind of I could be nature, human nature, or sacred, I suppose, but that's why I put it in that section. In Declan's birth, I don't know. I think, also my father's death. My father died last night is also in the sacred, and you might wonder why that would be. I think the sacred, to me, birth and death offer powerful, powerful experiences of the sacred. Somebody else might see or experience the same thing and not see anything sacred about it. But to me, it just blows me away. I don't know.
I'm going to ask the two last questions that are in here before we move on to your final poem, if that's okay. We might run a little bit over 40 minutes, but I think it'll be worth it. So you had wanted to write poetry for a long time. What changed when you went to Vermont that allowed you to begin, and has that continued since moving to Geneva post-Vermont?
So I fell in love with poetry when I was in seminary, and took a course in T.S. Eliot, the Four Quartets. But then at the same time, I also encountered Anne Sexton. And if you know the Four Quartets and Anne Sexton, they're like totally different. And all of a sudden I realized that there's a whole world of poetry that is very accessible. You don't have to work quite so hard at. And Anne Sexton wrote very powerful poems, poems of faith, even though she ended up killing herself. And I always try to write poems. And for those of you who have been part of my faith communities, you know that we replace mostly the New Testament, not the Gospels, but Paul and the letters of Paul with a contemporary poem, so that there's a Hebrew text and a contemporary poem and the Gospels. And for a lot of reasons. But anyway, so going back to Columbus, Ohio, to St. Stephen, some of you are members there. There's just doing that week after week after week of finding poems just made me somebody who just loved poetry. And I was frustrated because I could never write it. And then one night, as it says, and I mentioned this in the foreword of the book, I moved up to Vermont 6 months before her. And one night during that time period, I was in a Chinese restaurant, which was called the Walk and Roll. And it was 8 o'clock Sunday night. It was pretty depressing. And I opened this fortune cookie, and I looked at the fortune, and I said, and I wrote a poem on the napkin, and I thought, this is a poem. This really works. And so while I was writing fiction, I started doing poetry, and I think that there's a huge relationship between listening and writing poetry. I mean, in order to write poetry, I think you have to listen intensely, and I'm not sure exactly what the connection is there, but I think it's like painting. I mean, poetry is painting a word painting, trying to take an experience and give it to somebody else through word painting. And so just looking and listening is, I think, the process. And I don't know why, but yes, I'm still doing it. I'm working on a second collection of essays and poems. It's, for whatever reason, the pandemic has made that like walking through mud. I don't know why. It seems like it should be the perfect time to write, but it's really hard.
This next question is related to that feeling that I think is pretty universal. Where do you go to find the silence and inspiration you need to hear any angels, dark or otherwise?
Well, my dreams are pretty loud. So I don't have to go very far. But also I have the privilege and blessing of having to write a sermon every week. So I sit with the texts and listen. I mean, that's the whole process is, okay, what's in here? So that's part of it. You know, again, I think nature is part of that. Being in nature, we live by a lake now, and I have the ability to ride my bike for up to 18 miles on this bike path, and I walk the dog, and it's, you know, the bike riding right now, or not right now, but last summer and fall, biking through the woods was a powerful place to hear voices, or to hear myself think, I guess. You know, I have a poem that hasn't been published. It's around here someplace, but called a prayer for extroverts. And it's about, you know, it's a prayer for those who talk out loud to think. And so that's one of the challenges of this time is, for an extrovert is, you know, I need to talk out loud. And maybe that's why I hear stuff while I'm preaching. It's like, oh, that's what I was talking about. I don't know. It's probably not very helpful.
I'm going to sneak one last question in before your last poem. So poetry is getting more readership than ever these days. Do you have any thoughts on why that might be?
Hip hop. You know,
can you expand on that?
Well, I mean, I guess toward the end of the 19th century, poets could draw public crowds of 10,000 people. It was really a popular form, and then it fell, you know, out of favor, I guess. But you know, hip hop treats us to poetry, and the more pervasive hip hop has become in the culture, the more we associate. I mean, that we hear the poetry, I think. But and also a lot of that popularity of poetry is with millennial and Gen X and Gen Z. So I'm assuming that that's why. I don't really know. It's a, I don't know. It's a non-literal form of communication, I think. And so much of our communication otherwise is literal.
Well, thank you. Thank you for answering all of those questions. You want to finish us off with one of your favorite poems?
So thank you all. We were tempted to try to open this up into a big conversation, but we don't all know each other. Some people are just tuned in here without any experience of knowing me or anything else. So we're just going to try to leave it in this form, but it's amazing to see your faces, and I'm very, very grateful for you being part of this, and that's very lovely. Thank you. So this one's for you, Kathy and Denny. My dog and God. My dog and God are difficult to understand. So often dog stares, a forlorn tilt of the head, eyes hopeful. Yet she must know by now, so much inaction for me, she will get nothing. I look down and wonder what she wants. Hearing no words and seeing no further gestures, I go on emptying the dishwasher or writing this poem. God wants something too, but hearing silence and not seeing so much as a cute dog face from God, I go on brushing out the toilet and grocery shopping. Look, if you guys want something, say so. Thank you all very, very, very much. I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Thank